Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Hi, guys. I'm Dave Sain, Senior Shepherd here at LMC. It's a Wednesday night, a stormy Wednesday night here. Of course, for us, you know that means Bible study time. I know some of you guys are already online having a little chat there. Good to see all of you guys. If this is the first time that you are joining us tonight, make sure that, you go into the chat, say hello to everybody, let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Everybody can do that right now. Just take a millisecond, give us a thumbs up really, really quick. Helps the algorithm. And of course, make sure that you're subscribed and you hit that bell so you're notified each time that we do go live. If you enjoy the content, definitely share it with somebody else. We would appreciate that. And if you're ever in the area, please come down on a Sabbath and hang out with us and do fellowship with us. We would love that. All right, so got a whole bunch of stuff for you guys for tonight. Before I jump into this, I did put it on the chat as well. You may hear thunder behind me. It's pretty stormy over here. So I'm just taking that as Yah's presence, just saying, yeah, go ahead and preach it, son. So that's what we're going to do. And with that, just as a quick reminder, don't forget this upcoming September the 13th, we're going to be having a fellowship, sort of a invite a disciple to service. We're going to have some cards and stuff made up so you guys can hand them out. But start thinking about it now. Start praying about it now. Somebody at your job, a friend, somebody at your work, you drive on the bus with to go to work, somebody at school. Just somebody that Yah's been putting on your heart, a family member, a friend. Invite them. Invite them to service. We're going to have a great service. We're going to definitely make sure it's something that they can understand, that will minister to them. And of course, we'll have some food and some fellowship after, and hopefully be able to get some questions answered for those who might have questions. So this is a great opportunity for us to go out there and do some evangelism, some good old evangelism. So be part of that. That's going to be September the 13th, on our Shabbat service. And this upcoming weekend, I'm going to also be putting out the dates for the fall feast. I know that people are starting to think about it now. You got to work out stuff with your job and, just all that kind of mechanics of it. And so I'm going to let it out this upcoming weekend. I'll let you know what the dates are. Obviously, you guys know where my heart is leaning in this direction anyway. So I'm going to let you know what the dates are, even though we're not all the way through this explanation of the calendar. I'm going to get into it a little bit tonight. But it's going to take us like at least another 2 weeks to really kind of go through this information. But we'll give you that this upcoming Saturday, so this way you're aware, and you can start making whatever arrangements you need to make, and hopefully hang out with us this upcoming festivals. Okay, so with all of those commercials out of the way, tonight's study, let me pop this up here for you guys. Tonight's study is called Blind Guides. Now, hopefully you guys have been listening to our morning manners. Everything connects. Everything's absolutely connected. What we're doing on Wednesdays, we're doing on Fridays, what we're doing on Saturdays. It's all interconnected, trying to get as much information out to you guys. So this is going to be very, very much so connected to what we've been talking about each morning for our devotion. But it's going to go beyond that as well. So the notes are available. You can download them on the app. If you're watching on the app, you can download them, of course, in the YouTube description box. And you can follow along with all of the information that we've got there. So with all of that said, oh, yes. We lift up Sister Yesenia. Yeah, I heard you're not feeling good, dear. I'm so sorry to hear that. We pray that Yah would heal your body, give you relaxation in your mind, and just let your body do what it naturally does, and let Yah's hand be upon you. So we hope for a complete and total healing for you. So there you go. Let's see what else we got. Okay, here we go. The blind guides. Blind guides. Let me make this a little bit bigger for everybody so you guys can see it. Oh yeah, you guys hear that? That's Yah saying, go ahead, make it bigger. There we go. Blind guides. All right, and it's actually a painting by someone called. It's after the verse. It says, "The blind leading the blind. If the blind leads the blind, both will fall into a ditch." Which is, by the way, let me. What did I do here? I think. I don't know how that happened. Went a little bit too far. Here we go. Right in the beginning. Matthew chapter 15, verses 12 through 14 is where we're going to open up for tonight. Sorry, guys. Hope to make you guys dizzy as I did that on the screen. But here is Matthew chapter 15, verses 12 to 14, just as an opening thought for today. It says, Then his taught ones came and said to him, Do you know that the Pharisees stumbled when they heard this word? But he answering said, every plant which my heavenly Father has not planted shall be uprooted. Leave them alone. They are the blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind leads the blind, both shall fall into a ditch. Now, just to sort of give just a little background, I'm sure many of you guys already know where this is coming from. This is right after the master deals with the whole issue of the outside washing of the cups and the spoons and the couch, all of the oral tradition that comes through Pharisaic or rabbinical doctrine. And of course he goes into the whole thing about what's food, what does it mean to be clean on the inside versus clean on the outside. But at the end of the conversation, and he says a lot more than that. He outrightly tells the Pharisees, "You guys, you worship with your lips, but your hearts are far, far from me." In fact, he tells them their worship is in vain. And what they do is they do not teach the commandments of Yah; they teach the commandments of men, or the oral Torah. And that's still here today. Phariseeism is still here today. We don't call it Pharisees today. They're just called Judaism, rabbinical Judaism, conservative Judaism, Orthodox Judaism. But it's still the same Pharisaic doctrines all the way through from oral Torah and other things as well that we'll get into just in a little bit. So his disciples hear him speak to the Pharisees in this way, and obviously they're kind of upset. Don't forget, the Pharisees are also leaders, right? They're also political leaders with a lot of power. And they're a little concerned. You kind of ticked off the Pharisees, and the master's answer just blows me away. And this is so important. I really want us to put on our spiritual thinking caps as we go through this. Let me ask you a question before you even go any further. If you met somebody, if you had somebody, I don't know, a friend, a neighbor, and all they did was lie to you, steal things from your yard, borrowed things out of your garage and never gave them back, accused you of all sorts of things, uh, spied on you, did all sorts of horrible things to you. Is that the person you would go to for advice? I dare say we would all probably say, no, that would probably be the last person that you go to for advice. Keep that in the back of your head as we go through this particular study tonight. But the master calls them the blind leading the blind. But more than that, he says, every tree that my father did not plant, which is telling us that the Pharisees are not a planting of Father. Father's the vine dresser, right? Messiah is the vine. Father's the vine dresser. He does the planting. And Messiah is telling us that Pharisaic Judaism is not from him. It is not the planting of Yah. It's there. It's powerful. The majority of people in Israel at this time in the first century and today are involved in it, but that still doesn't make it right. And so here the master leaves no stone unturned and telling them they're the blind leading the blind. And so not only are they in trouble, but the people who follow them are also in trouble because they are in error if the people you're following are in error. And everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does dumb things. We've how many times have we realized, my goodness, we thought it was one way, but as time goes on, Yah opens up our eyes and we realize it's something else. That's different. That's the pursuit of truth. The pursuit of truth, I think Yah looks at us as, loving children trying to learn and understand that meets his approval. But when you just reject truth or you're just dead set on your truth and nothing else, that's a problem. That's actually called apostasy. So with that, how does that fit into all of this story of the Dead Sea Scrolls? Well, it actually does. Now I'm gonna give you just a little bit of historical background. I don't want to go into it too much today. I'm going to touch on it this upcoming Saturday, Shabbat as well. And give you some references and some stuff that you can look up, some books that you can read that will sort of give you some of the background of all of this, because the history is, number one, absolutely amazing. Number two, it's history we don't know. No, this is not history you learn in Bible college. This is not history you learn in seminary. This is not the stuff that they will teach you, and yet it's out there. We now know it. This is history. This is fact. This is the way it is. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of the three sects of the Jews that are there in the first century, and it's way before the first century. This history is probably about 200 years before Messiah. So just as a couple of references, they're up on the screen. Uh, the conflict between the Zadokian, the Zadok priest, and the people who follow them, right? Because not everybody's a Zadok priest that's in the Qumran community. Remember, they're not called Essenes. Essenes is what Philo and Plenary and Josephus called them. That's not what they called themselves. They never referred to themselves as Essenes. They were the community, the Yachad, the people of the community joined together, like the word Echad, the people joined together in covenant together. But the people who were the leaders of the community were the Zadok priests. Now, there were communities all over Israel, including in Jerusalem, including just outside Jerusalem. In Bethany was a place where there was a community of Qumran, of people from the Qumran community that lived there. They ministered there. The Qumran people were known for their healing, for the herbs, for all the medicines that they made. And so they would stay outside of Jerusalem in Bethany, a town just on the hill of the Mount of Olives before you get to Jerusalem. And people that were sick and injured, they would go to Bethany, and these were almost like, it was almost like a walk-in clinic. That's where you want to for healing, which is makes sense then why later on we find Eliezer. We call him Lazarus, most of our Bibles, but Eliezer is there, and he's died. He was probably there in that, well, it's a Qumran community, number one, but also probably for healing. And of course, the master performs an amazing, amazing miracle there. We'll talk more about that in just a few seconds. So the conflict between the Zadokian priest slash the Qumran community and the Pharisees and Sadducees predates John the Immerser. Because we open up the Gospels, one of the first things you read is the Pharisees and Sadducees, come to where John is baptizing, where the Jordan is, and where is that? In the Qumran. He's in the Qumran baptizing because he lived out there amongst those people. He's there baptizing, and they send the Pharisees and Sadducees out to him, not to get baptized, but to find out what he's doing. They didn't believe what he was doing, and his response to them right off the bat is, "You brood of vipers, you snakes! Who told you?" He rails at them, and you realize, man, there is some animosity between John and these people, and we're just getting, the story is just opening up like that, and we have no background to understand why there is animosity there. Well, here's some of the background. So this story, or the animosity, predates John the Immerser and predates the incarnate Messiah, that is Messiah in the flesh, that is Emmanuel, God with us. It predates the birth by about 200 years. And so this conflict was there before John got there and had been mulling over for now, well, 200 years. Do you imagine a feud for 200 years? I mean, I think the only thing we could maybe wrap our minds around here in America would be like the Hatfields and the McCoys, right? I mean, just like generations of people that just hate each other. It just doesn't matter why. They just hate each other. Well, here it is. This conflict of animosity between them, and why is pretty important to understanding the Gospels as we open them up. So for point number 2 under there, for about, this is really important that we realize this, that we have this perspective. For about 700 plus years, by birthright, because that's the only way that the high priesthood is to be passed down. Is to be passed down by birthright. And by the high priesthood, it's the high priest and all of the other priests that are in charge. And then there's always lower priests, Levites. So that if the Zadoks were the high priest and their office was given to them by birth, for over 700 years by birthright, the sons of Zadok ruled the temple services from day one of Solomon's temple all the way to about 200 years before Messiah comes, with a brief pause during the Babylonian captivity. Of course, they're in Babylon, and in Babylon, just like in Rome, when in Rome you do what Rome does, in Babylon you do what Babylon does. But when they got out of Babylon and they got back to the land of Israel and they started things over, they reinstalled the Zadok high priest, Joshua, Zerubbabel and Joshua, the king and the high priest. He was a son of Zadok. So they started all over. So there was a brief respite of no high priest, but for 700 plus years. America, we're going to be celebrating next year our 250th anniversary. For 700 years, the Zadok priesthood ruled over the temple until the revolt of the Levites, or the lesser, well, not, they were not priests, they're lesser Levites, because not all Levites became priests. We know this, and now we know the Zadoks were the ones by birthright who would run the temple. We've done that study already. But there were other people who served, doing the wood chopping, the moving of the ashes, the setting up, the closing down, the cleaning. All of those other things were done by Levites. So there was a lot of other people there. They would be considered lesser Levites. So there was a revolt by them, the Levites serving within the temple. They wanted the authority, and they also wanted the Hellenization of Israel. That is, now we're talking past the time of King. They're out of Babylon. The Persians empire is gone. Now the Greeks are there, and they're running the world. You've got the Seleucids in Syria. You got the Ptolemies in Egypt, and in Israel they want Greek culture. At least these under priests, or these under Levites, these lower Levites too, and many other people in Israel. This comes right out of the book of Maccabees. You can read it for yourself. It tells you there were a lot of people who wanted the Greek ways. They wanted the Greek language. They wanted the Greek names. They wanted the Greek food. They wanted the Greek calendar. They wanted all of it. Greece wanted that too. They wanted the whole world to be unified. Just like today, you hear in the WF, where they want the whole world to be unified. No borders. We're just all one people. Well, that idea didn't start with the WEF here. This was the idea of Alexander the Great and Rome way back then. Make the whole world Greek, or make the whole world Roman. And unfortunately, this revolt was successful. Number 3 on your notes there. The Zadok priests were exiled originally, or initially, to Egypt, which is a great story that has everything to do with the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. We're not going to get to it now, but we're going to talk about that later. They initially go to Egypt and they set up a temple there for a while anyway. The lower Levites assumed the name. This is crazy. Think about this for a second. So the Zadok priest, in Hebrew, you would say Zadok. That was the name. It's a proper name. They were the Zadok. If they are the Zadok priest, just means they're the priest of Zadok, the children of Zadok. Well, they get kicked out. They get kicked out in a revolt, in a very violent revolt. Those who do escape to Egypt. And then the lesser Levites come in, the people who have no birthright whatsoever to run the temple, to be in charge, to be the priest. Plus, they're Hellenists. They want the Greek world in there. They need Greece to settle down the different divisions that are going on within their nation. Well, they take on the name, since they wanted to speak Greek. Greek became one of the primary languages in Israel from this point on. And so what they wind up doing is, instead of it, since the Zadok priest left and went to Egypt, these lesser priests assumed their name, except not in Hebrew, that is Zadok. They assumed it in Greek. And in Greek, you say Saduk or Sadducee. Sadducee is the same word as Zadok. They kicked out those who were by birthright the priests, and then assumed their titles. Everything's good with everybody else around. These are still the Sadiq, the Sadok. No, they're not. These were not people by birthright, but they assume this. So we say Sadducee, we think that means just something totally different. No, they took somebody else's name. And again, like I said, it's the Greek form of the Hebrew word Zadok. They invited the Greek language, they invited the Greek culture, they invited the Greek food, and this is important. They invited in the Greek calendar as well. There's a whole bunch of this issue over the calendar isn't something that we're just dealing with today. This was the issue 200 years before Messiah came. This was the issue when Messiah was here. This was the issue after, and it's the issue today. By the time Messiah came, there's at least three different calendars that are being used in Israel. There's the Sadduceic calendar, there's the Pharisaic calendar, and there is the Qumran community calendar or the Zadok calendar. So at least three, maybe even more, but at least three calendars were going on in the first century when Messiah is here. So this thing on the calendar, and we're still going through it now. We've got groups that do something on one day, something on another. We've got even amongst the different denominations of our of Christendom around the world. You've got groups that celebrate one day, groups that celebrate a different day or on a different date, and so this is nothing new. As like Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun, and certainly there is not. So they invited the Greek language, the culture, the food, the calendar. It's not just us. This has been going on for a long time. So, unfortunately, this wasn't a smooth transition. Even though they had gotten rid of the Zadok priest, there were other groups there that were fighting for authority as well, namely the Pharisees. The Pharisees were a non Levitical group, self appointed leaders who proclaimed authority by oral Torah. That is not necessarily what Moses said, it's what they think, how they interpret what Moses said. They did not believe in the whole concept and idea of the miracles continuing, of signs, of the Holy Spirit, of any of those things. I think those things had already passed. They didn't believe in the whole gift of prophecy. None of that was part of their belief, nor the Pharisees as well. None of that was part of their belief. They believed all of that died beforehand, but that they had received by oral tradition passed down from generation to generation how you should interpret the Torah. And of course, it changes with every generation. And of course, they called their leaders teacher or rabbi. This was not a centralized temple thing. That was the Pharisees, the Sadducees. This was they were gaining popularity and influence all over Israel in little houses of worship called synagogues, and of course that gave them great power because a large volume of the people followed them. Even though the Sadducees had political power in Jerusalem, inevitably they butted heads. They butted heads, and number one, two, three, four, number five there, they murdered each other. They fought each other back and forth, killed each other. It was the Hatfields and McCoys going on for a long time. And eventually a civil war breaks out between Pharisees and Sadducees, somewhere between 90 and 80 BC. Don't forget BC, you're counting down. So between 90 and 80 BC, there's a civil war, and the Pharisees get kicked out and they go to Egypt. But they wind up coming back. The Pharisees, there was no stability because of these two groups fighting with each other over and over. So what they wind up doing through their own efforts, they had Hellenized already. They knew that they could not control all of these. You know, one school would go and murder another school. One person would murder another for religious beliefs. They invited. I know this sounds crazy. They invited the Romans in. They invited the Romans in to bring peace. And so Rome steps into the picture and they see, and first they put the Sadducees in control because they're the ones that actually invited them in. But the fighting doesn't stop. They then put they put the Sadducees in control. Then they wind up putting the Pharisees in control. That doesn't get any better. Then they put them together in the Sanhedrin as a group and they said, okay, now we're going to take one of each of you and you're both in control. And that didn't work either. Eventually, what they do is they look to Idumea, they look to Herod, and they make Herod king of Israel, figuring he knows the Jews, but he's not like them. He's not part of this whole religious craziness these people are doing. And so Herod becomes in charge of Israel, becomes the king of Israel. He's obviously not a Jew. He's not on the line of David. Nothing is going right here. It's total apostasy. It's got a wrong king. It's got a wrong priest. And it's got people who have religious authority making up information about the Torah who should have never, ever been there, who are not the planting of Yah. But because Rome was there, the Zadoks were allowed to come back because now, well, at least with Rome, there was like some sort of police force, some sort of security, some sort of peace where they knew that the Pharisees and Sadducees couldn't just go outright and murder them. And so they came back, but they didn't come right back into Jerusalem, at least not right at first. They went to the Qumran. And in the Qumran, they established a community. They never sought to go into Jerusalem and, with swords and knives and take over the temple again and say, we're the priests. They didn't do that. They had a different mission at this point. Their mission was to wait for the coming of Messiah, to make ready a people for Yah, to call out the way. And they did that. They created this community and they did that, and people followed them. But the biggest of the three groups were the Pharisees. The majority of people followed that. The second, a powerful group, would have been your Sadducees, and then the Essenes were a much smaller group. Even though I'm going to show you there was actually an Essene, Menachem, that sat on the Jerusalem Council prior to around or just before the birth of Messiah, but he was alive all the way up to the time of Saul. And not only was he part of the Sanhedrin, he's mentioned in the Talmud, and he's also mentioned in our Bibles as he goes back to the Qumran community. He's mentioned in our Bibles, he and others with him, 80 of the school of prophets. The school of prophets comes, that whole term, the school of prophets, that comes from the Qumran. There was no such thing of that in Phariseeism nor Sadduceeism. That was a Qumran thing. Well, he and his school of prophets are the ones that lay hand on Saul and Barnabas, Menachem. Josephus talks about him. Obviously, our Gospels talk about him, and so does the Talmud. So historically verified, it's the same person. We know that he was an Essene. We know he was from the Zadok community. We know that he was a priest. And yet we know that he's a believer. He's part of the people that lay hands on Saul later on in the gospel accounts in the book of Acts. So they're intermixed. They're living together. There's Essenes in Israel as well. In Jerusalem, there's an Essene community. There's a story about Menachem and Herod way before that we'll get into a little bit later. But both of those groups, that is the Pharisees and the Sadducees, while they despised each other and were always at each other's throats, they despised the Zadok priest as well. And they were the small kid on the block, so they had no real power and authority, nor did they even try to overthrow. But the Pharisees and Sadducees, that was a different story. That was a very, very different story. So that's just a little bit of background. We're going to get into more of the historical stuff. I'll give you dates and times and places you guys can maybe look this stuff up for yourselves. I'm just giving you the Reader's Digest version here so that you've got a little bit of a mindset as we begin to read, as we begin to see things in the gospel account as to why is there so much animosity. Well, this had been brewing for a long, long time. That is, they got kicked out, went to Egypt. Now they're back. There's people in the temple that shouldn't be. The temple's an abomination. These other people that are teachers are not supposed to be teachers. So there's a lot going on. This is what John comes into. This is what the Messiah comes into. So here's just a couple. Hopefully, you guys have been checking out your Dead Sea Scrolls. Read like I said, the first one's the Damascus Scroll. There's another one called the Melchizedek Scroll. We're going to get into the Melchizedek Scroll soon, so you might want to read that because we're going to talk about Melchizedek, which, by the way, is not a Pharisaical doctrine. A Jewish doctrine. It's not a rabbinical doctrine, and it is not a Sadduceic doctrine. But it is a Qumran doctrine that the coming Messiah is Melchizedek. He comes in the order or the priest of Melchizedek, and they believe that he was Elohim. They believe that the Melchizedek would be Elohim. And I'll show you that when we get into the scroll, which is kind of crazy because we believe that. That's us, right? So you see the foundation of where we are. This is the whole reason for the book of Hebrews. This is what Saul's doing because he's the author of it, really. I mean, at least that's what some of the early church fathers say. He was the author of it. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about a doctrine that had already been there, an understanding that had already been there. But now they know who he is. They know he's Messiah. And so everything he says is stuff that's actually already been said, but it's never been said by Pharisees and it's never been said by Sadducees. So here's just a couple of Dead Sea Scroll terms. So as you read, you can understand. They wind up talking in code a lot. They don't outrightly say Pharisee, they don't outrightly say Sadducee, but that's who they're talking about. That's who their adversaries are. They don't even outrightly say themselves. They call themselves by something. So here's just some of the terms that they refer to of themselves. Here, up here, they refer to themselves as sons of light. They referred to themselves as the way. Now, when they said the way, what they were, because this is obviously before Messiah comes, they were called the way. They called themselves the way. That was sort of their defining statement because they used Isaiah 43 as sort of their vision statement. They go to the wilderness to prepare the way. But the way that they're referring to is the way of Moses, but not Moses the way the Pharisees are saying Moses said, or the way the Sadducees are saying Moses said. They are of the way, the true way, the things Moses meant, not the religion that has become the main religion in Israel of the day. And they believe that when Messiah came, when the Melchizedek came, he would reveal those words to everybody, the true intent of the Torah. Well, that's exactly what winds up happening when Messiah comes. He reveals the true intent of the Torah, the truth of who Moses is or what Moses said. So that's what their reference is to the way. Obviously, Messiah comes and he says, I am the way. Well, he is. He is the truth of what Moses said. He is the way. So they're not opposite. They're really complementary to each other. They refer to themselves as a branch. They're a sect of Israel. They're a branch coming out of Israel. They refer to themselves as the Yachad. Again, that's a word. Its root word is Echad, in unity. They referred to themselves as the Qumran community. They did not refer to themselves as Essenes. Other people called them holy ones, saints. You notice they don't call the Pharisees that. They don't call the Sadducees that. They don't say anything like that about them. But these people they call the pious ones, the holy ones, the humble ones. And of course, from the time of Moses, this is what it gets recorded within the Dead Sea Scrolls, that from the time of Moses all the way to the first temple, all the way until they were kicked out of the second temple, that they kept a solar-based calendar. Now, of course, we only have records going back about 150, actually even later than that. I saw some stuff that a dear brother sent me about the trying to figure out the age of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they're thinking these things are way, 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 way older than we thought they were. Not 100, 200 years prior, even older than that. But it doesn't particularly, at least in my mind, matter when the version that we've got was written. It's a story that it's been being told and passed down from way before. I mean, you can read a book today about George Washington and get all the history of George Washington, but the person who wrote the book today wasn't there. But we're passing down information. Even the Torah, we've got the Torah of Moses. Well, that's not the one Moses wrote. We can't look at the original manuscripts and say, well, this is exactly what he wrote. That's just not how this thing works. But but they claimed, and we'll, as we get into the calendar, that the calendar that was kept in Moses' day, and I'll be able to show you that at another time, all the way up to the time that they were kicked out. Of course, there was the gap there in Babylon where it wasn't kept. They kept the Babylonian calendar. When you're in Babylon, you do what the Babylonians tell you. You bow down to the statue, or you die, or you get to put in a fiery furnace. Now, of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are able to stand up, but the majority of people in Israel, they all bowed down. Whoever was there, they bowed down. Of course, the story's about those three. When you're in Babylon, you do what the Babylonians do, and they adopted the Babylonian culture and a lot of the things that came out of Babylon, brought it back with them. Even though they restored the temple, they restored those practices, that influence was already there in a Pharisaic way and later on in a Sadduceic way. And it becomes the issue about 200 years before Messiah. So that's how they refer to themselves. Some of the words that they use to refer to themselves. Words that they use to refer to others. When you read, as you're reading through the community scroll or some of the other things, and they talk about the sons of darkness, or they call them the movers of the landmark. They also call them snakes and vipers. They also call them shoddy wall builders. They also refer to them as whitewashed. Of course, they're talking about the Pharisees. These are terms or idioms that they used, instead of using the word Pharisee, they used to define them. They were the sons of darkness, in particular, because there was, now it's more than this, but this was attached to the calendar. It's a lunar calendar, but it's also attached to the oral Torah. And the vast majority of Israelites then, certainly in the synagogues, more people outside in the synagogues than in the temple, during the week, during the year, you go to the temple 3 times a year. They ran the synagogues. The synagogues were all over the place, probably all over the world at that point. That's the authority they had. So they had a lot of power and a lot of people that followed them. Uh, so these are just some of the idioms that are used in the Dead Sea Scrolls way before Messiah gets here, way before John gets here. These are idioms that are used to refer to the Pharisees because they were Pharisees way before John got here and way before Messiah got here. And we're going to see these same terms are going to pop up again, obviously, not only in John's mouth, but in Messiah's mouth as well. Now, when it came to the Pharisees, when you read in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the word wicked priests, the man of the lie, or the seeker of smooth things. Those are some of the idioms that are used to refer to the Sadducees. The Sadducees, the ones who sought the authority and adopted the name, they were called seeker of smooth things because they went along to get along. They invited Greece in to get along. They invited the Romans in to get along. So long as if the Romans came in and killed all their enemy, that's fine. Just leave us in power. So long as you leave us in power, that's good. That's why they're referred to as the seeker of smooth things. Obviously, the man of lie, what they were doing was wrong. The wicked priest, the people that were in there that should not have been in there. And they too were attached to a Greek calendar, a lunar calendar. We'll get into why it's a Greek calendar. It's really the Babylonian calendar, but because Babylon gets it from Greece, Greece comes in through the influence and the invitation of the Sadducees and others, the Hellenists. It becomes part of the culture of Israel in the first century. And even their calendar is a little bit different from the Pharisees. You're going to see that there's a day of first fruits for the Pharisees, a day of first fruits for the Sadducees. There's a day of Shavuot for the Pharisees. There's a day of Shavuot for the Sadducees, and they're different days. Um, and they had authority mainly there in Jerusalem in the temple. So you got the Pharisees that have a lot more authority, a lot more of them, and the Sadducees who have authority, and they share that authority in the form of a Sanhedrin, which Yah never told them to do, but they did it anyway. Rome told them to do it. But the one who was really in charge, or at least over it all, would be Herod, and then whoever the Roman governor was that sat there and tried to keep all of these people from killing each other, which is pretty much what they did. Now, each group considered the other group heretics. The Pharisees considered the Sadducees heretics. The Sadducees considered the Pharisees heretics. They both considered the Zadok priest, the Qumran community heretics. The Zadok the community considered both of them heretics as well. So nobody liked each other. The difference was, like I said, the Qumran community didn't go in there with knives and clubs and shields and daggers and try to take over everything, as did both of those groups before. And they fought for each other. There was literally a war for authority going on where they would lie, they would cheat, they would steal, they would murder to keep their authority. And give no vindication whatsoever to the Qumran community because they knew what they were about. They knew what their claims were. And they were instead called them a sect. They were all different sects, but a sect. Josephus is the one that tells us the three branches or the three sects in Israel in the first century were the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and he says the Essenes, or people of the way. And I kind of already explained to you why it's the way. All right, so with all of that as a little bit of background, let's get into some of this. Let's describe some of the Pharisees, and there's no way we can do every verse there is about Pharisees. It would take us a couple hours to go through everything, but here's just a couple. So we get a little bit of a window. And I'm assuming everybody's read their Bible enough times that we already should, even if you didn't know anything about the Dead Sea Scroll, you didn't know anything about the Qumran community, you can't help but open up your Bible and realize, man, these Pharisees, they're bad people. They're just, there's something about them. But it's not just the Pharisees, because there's a couple of terms that are going to be used that we need to define so that we know what we're reading when we read it in the New Testament. And we didn't know. Nobody knew. Nobody realized it until now. So here's a couple of things. Here's John chapter 7, verse 11. The question being, would the Pharisees and Sadducees kill to stay in power? Well, just by history before Messiah comes, yes, again and again and again and again, and they would make treaties with the Greeks and send gold and silver and everything else to the Greeks so long as they kept us in power, and they would do the same with the Romans, and so they would do anything to maintain power. Lie, cheat, steal, murder. They had already done it. They're going to do it in the gospel story, and they're going to do it in the future as well. Here's John chapter 7 and verse 11. This is the master saying, and after this, Yahusha was walking in Galilee, for he did not wish to walk in Judah, because the Yehudim, the Jews. Now I'm going to give you a definition here, and I'm going to show you why is this definition. It's going to make reading your Bible this much more easy. You notice how so often it says, and it was the Jews, and it was the feast of the Jews, or the Jews did this. And you're reading, you say, wait a minute, isn't Messiah a Jew? Isn't James, John, Peter, Andrew, Timothy, but aren't they Jews? Well, of course they are. Absolutely they are. But this term they're using it as an identifying mark, not just of anybody who's Jewish, but they're talking about people that follow the Pharisees. That's what the term means, and I'll show it to you in a second because we get the definition in here. So after this, he's walking in Galilee. He doesn't want to go to Judah because the Jews, by Jews, he means the Pharisees and Sadducees and those who follow them, because it's the blind leading the blind, were seeking to kill him. So would they kill to maintain power? Yes, absolutely. They have, and they're going to do it again. Verse 44, same chapter. It says, so this is after he, does the whole thing and telling them, he's going to give them rivers of water, all the rest of that. Verse 44, and some of them wished to take him. They got people there, guards. They want them to grab him and kill him. They wanted to take him. That's what it says in verse 11. But no one had laid hands on him. The officers therefore came. Who are they coming to? The chief priest, the Sadducees. They're also called Herodians, but they're Sadducees, the people who should not be in charge. Caiaphas, Annas, all the people around him, the chief priests, people on the Sanhedrin. Those are the chief priests. And the Pharisees. They conspired together. They hate each other. They hate each other, but they're going to conspire together to get rid of this Messiah, to get rid of this man who's calling himself, or this prophet who's doing all of these amazing things. Because that's not supposed to be done. Do you ever wonder why the Pharisees, no matter all the miracles that they saw, it didn't faze them? Well, that's part of Pharisaic doctrine. That's part of their belief. That stuff doesn't happen anymore. So if you're doing it, you got to be doing it by Beelzebub, which is what they say. You're doing this by the devil. They refused, no matter what was happening right in front of them, to soften their heart and realize, oh my goodness, this is bigger than us. They just refused it. They were stuck on their doctrine. They were stuck on their particular belief, the abominations that they were involved in. So anyway, so it goes on, and some of them, but they did not lay hands on them. And the officers therefore came to the chief priest and the Pharisees, and they said to them, why did you not bring him? So were they willing to kill him? Yes. Early on in the story, yes. Here's Mark chapter 7 and verse 3. It says, so this is part of the whole idea that we were reading, where he says, the blind lead the blind, a plant that my father didn't plant. They're not a plant that my father planted. Well, that comes out of this. So here's the definition. Look at this, guys. I want you to see that this is a definition, or it helps us define when we read, because the Jews were seeking to kill him. But by Jews, we know it means Pharisees. I'm sorry, I underlined the wrong one there. We know that it means chief priests and Pharisees, and those who followed them are referred to in the Gospel of John, and even in some other places, like the book of Acts, as the Jews. Now, I don't want people, they're going to hear this and think, well, this is an anti Semitic message. No, no, it's not. It isn't. There's different groups of Jews, and they didn't like each other. And that's the story. That's how it's written. And that's the only way you can really begin to understand what's actually being said. Here's a definition. I'm going to do this in pink so you can see. So, why does Messiah say that they're a plant that my father has, they're a tree my father has planted? Well, listen to what they say. For the Pharisees and all the Yehudim, all the Jews, the majority, they were the biggest sect. The majority of people in the land of Israel, outside the synagogues and other places, and of course, even there in Jerusalem, the Pharisee, those who followed the Pharisees, are referred to in the Gospels as the Jews. So, and you can see it right here. For the Pharisees and all the Yehudim, all the Jews, do not eat unless they wash their hands thoroughly, holding fast the tradition of the elders. It was the Jews who held fast the tradition or the oral Torah. They practiced the oral Torah given to them by the Pharisees. Again, what you can do, how far you can pick up your mat, what you can do on the Sabbath, what you can't, spitting on the ground, all of that stuff. I mean, there's obviously some instruction about what you can and cannot do on the Shabbat, but what they did was overboard, way overboard. So there it is. There's a definition. So when you read in the Gospel of John, or even in some of the other Gospels, and it's referring to those who are following the Pharisees, they're referred to as the Jews. But that's not to say that the disciples aren't Jews and all the people that follow them aren't Jews. Of course they are. John chapter 8, verse 59, it says, therefore, so here's what they do. So what did the Pharisees do again? Therefore, they picked up stones to throw at him. This is John chapter 8. He just finished telling them, you guys don't know the Torah. Your father's the devil. We're getting into those verses in 1 second. So what do they want to do? Kill him. Kill him. Not just disagree or agree to disagree and walk away. They want to kill him. Here's John chapter 10 and verse 30. The master says, I and my father are one. Again, the Yehudim picked up stones to stone him. Another time, this is after the whole I'm the good shepherd stuff, and they're telling him that he's Messiah. They say, "Tell us plainly you're Messiah." He says, "I already told you. You guys don't believe me because you're not my sheep." So he tells them, "I and my Father are one. We are echad. We are yachad. We are community. We are in unity. My Father and I are one." Again, the Yehudim picked up stones to stone him. Therefore, they were seeking again to seize him, but he went forth out of the midst, out of their hand, and once more to the other side of the Jordan, to the place where Yochanan was immersing at the first, and there he stayed. So after they try to kill him in the wintertime, where does he go back to? He goes back to the Qumran. He goes back to the place where John was, who came out of the desert, out of the Arabah, out of the Qumran, and he stays there and he teaches. Well, who are the people going to come around him? Well, all the people of the community are going to come around to him, and that's where he stays teaching. He goes to the place where Yochanan was immersing at the first, in the Qumran, in the Arabah. Here's John chapter 11 and verse 8. It says, the taught ones said to him, so he's there teaching in the Qumran, and they get notice that Eliezer's sick, that Lazarus is sick. And it tells us it takes him 4 days, right, to get back. It's not a 4-day journey, but it takes him 4 days to get back to him. He's going to Bethany. He's going to that city, that town just on the Mount of Olives outside of Jerusalem, the same place where Messiah would ascend from after the resurrection, which says a lot. So what he just left the Qumran community, or the Qumran in the wilderness, right? Now he's going back to a town that is run by people of the community. It's known as a healing place. And then later on, when he leaves and he ascends from Bethany. If that's not shining a spotlight, it's there. It's all over the place. We just never saw it before, but it is absolutely everywhere, mentioning this community. But it doesn't call them Essenes, but here they are. They're right here. We just need a little history to understand it. So they call him. Lazarus is dying. Come back to Bethany, or and of course, by the time he gets there, he's been dead a couple of days. So he's in a Qumran community that all of Jerusalem knows is a Qumran community. They've sent in spies, Pharisees and Sadducees, and others of the Jews who followed him that are watching him. And what does he do? He raises a guy from the dead who's been dead 4 days. Where? In the place of suffering, in the town that is a Qumran community town. Who is that giving verification to? Obviously, it's verifying him, it's verifying Father. I mean, if he did this in a Pharisaic town, the Pharisees, well, they probably wouldn't have, but if they were smart, they would say, hey, look, he did this in our town. Or if he did this in a Sadducean town, or in a Samaritan town, they would say, hey, look, he did this in our town. Well, he didn't. He did it in a community town. The greatest miracle there is. I mean, aside from his own resurrection, but this guy was dead for 4 days, and he brings him back to life. And look at what happens right after that. Right after that, here's John chapter 11, verse 46. It says, but some of them went away, and the Pharisees told them. So if I should have put in verse 45, it says, and some of the Jews were there, and they believed, right? So they see Lazarus raised. They're believing, oh, wait a minute, maybe all this stuff is saying about Messiah is true. Maybe he is Messiah. Then there are others who are the Jews that are part of the Pharisees and Sadducees, but some went away to the Pharisees and told them what Messiah did and where he did it. He did it in Bethany. So the chief priest, so what's their response? So the chief priest and the Pharisees, that is Sadducees and Pharisees, gathered a council and said, that's the Sanhedrin, and said, what shall we do? Because this man does many signs, and we don't believe in signs. That's from Belial. That's from Baal. He's doing signs by Beelzebub. He can't. That's the whole idea when he says blasphemy of the spirit. Where that whole topic comes in, because they say everything you're doing by the devil. You have to be, because we who interpret orally the Torah, we tell you what the Word of God says. We tell you that there are no such things as this. So you got to be doing this by the devil. Of course, obviously, he was not. So they got to gather the council. They said, what shall we do? Because this man does many signs. And again, where he does the signs, if we let him alone like this, they all the Jews, the people who believe us, the people who follow you, Pharisees, the people who follow Sadducees, the people who follow us, Pharisees all over the place, they shall believe in him. And look what's going to happen. And the Romans shall come and take away from us both our place and nation. Just like they took the authority of the Zadoks away, fought amongst themselves, brought Rome in to bring peace. They're saying, if this happens and people start going and we start losing, there's going to be all sorts of animosity, and Rome's going to do what we asked them to do when we brought them in, because we just keep going at each other's throats, and we're going to lose our authority. It's always been about authority. And do they stop killing there? Of course, no. In fact, they say not only do they want to kill Messiah after this, they wanted to kill Lazarus too. Just kill him, put them all to death, just, put it in the grave and forget about it. And of course, it doesn't stop there. It goes right up to the crucifixion. And then even into the book of Acts, you've got the Pharisees and the Sadducees stoning Stephen to death. And who's there? another Pharisee. So this spirit of the Pharisee, it's been here a long time. Like if you listen to yesterday's manna, the master said, all the righteous blood, you're just like your forefathers. You're murderers. You murdered just like your forefathers did, who murdered all the righteous ones. You say we're not going to do that, but that's what you do. That's been your history. He says, and I'm going to send to you righteous ones and scribes and wise men, and you're going to do the same thing to them as your forefathers have done, and they did. But then he says, but all the righteous blood from Abel, that is the first one murdered, to Zechariah, son of Berechiah. This is in Chronicles. You can read. He was stoned to death right in the holy place. The master says, all of that was you. All of that is the spirit of the Pharisees. And you are going to do exactly what all of them have done. And of course, they do. They do it to him and they do it to the disciples. And you see that same spirit here in Saul. Because what's Saul? Well, he's a Pharisee. It says, and Shaul was giving approval to his death, this is the stoning of Stephen. And on the day there was a great persecution against the assembly, which was at Jerusalem. And they were all scattered throughout the countries of Judah and Samaria, except the emissaries. So Saul was like, fine, yeah, this guy's a heretic, kill him. They didn't care. Acts 9:1. But Shaul, still breathing threats and murder against the taught ones of the master. Wait a minute, you got a Pharisee, a religious guy, preaching murder? Yep. The taught ones of the master, having come to the high priest, asked for him letters to the congregation at Damascus, so that if he found any who were of the way, whether men or women, to bring them bound to Jerusalem. Now, obviously, the term way belonged to one group of people, and those group of people are waiting for a Messiah who they believe is Melchizedek, who they believe is the Son of God, who they believed was going to raise up from the dead. I know it sounds crazy. That was part of their belief already. And now here he is. They would certainly become believers much, much more easily than anybody else. That's what they were waiting for. That's what they were learned about. That's how they understood prophecy. Acts chapter 9, verse 22. So Saul, he then has his conversion, right? The Pharisee who doesn't believe in signs from heaven gets what? A sign from heaven. I mean, that's just irony. That's like Yah laughing. Fine. You say you don't want signs from heaven. Here's what I'm going to do. Knocks him off his tall horse. I am Yeshua, the one whom you are persecuting. Why do you kick against the goads? That was enough. And then blinds him. Shows him what his spirituality really is. And then so Saul's now a believer. Yeah, I would have been too. So Saul kept increasing in strength and was confounding the Jews who dwelt in Damascus, proving that he is the Messiah. And after many days had elapsed, the Jews plotted to kill him. Same definition. The Jews that followed the Pharisees tried to kill him. So exactly what he was doing is now going to be done to him because that spirit's still there. Acts 22, verse 22, and they were listening to him until this word, and they lifted up their voice, saying, away with such a one from the earth. So here's him giving his testimony at Jerusalem, for it is not fit that he should live. They turn on him again, and they want to kill him, as they were shouting and tearing their garments and throwing dust into the air. Acts 23:6. Now Shaul perceived that, so he's going on trial, and he's on trial between Pharisees and Sadducees. He's not a dumb guy. He's like, how do I get out of this mess? He perceived that one part was Sadducees and the other part Pharisees. Well, he's been a Pharisee. He knows these people don't like each other. He knows it's only going to take just a little nudge to get them at each other's throats. So what does he do? He cried out in the council, men and brothers, I'm a Pharisee. Well, not really, but I'm a Pharisee. I'm a student of Gamaliel, who's probably one of the greatest rabbis from a Judaism perspective. And yet one of his greatest students, Saul, all Gamaliel's other students are mentioned in the history books, Talmud, and everything. Not Saul. Somebody took an eraser and scribbled that part out because of all of this. I'm a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. I am being judged concerning the expectation and resurrection of the dead, which was a Pharisaical belief. And when he said this, there came a dissension between the Pharisees and Sadducees. That's it. Lit them off. They're at each other's throats. And the crowd was divided. Saul read the room and he played it perfectly. And then he goes before Felix, the governor, Acts 24, verse 14. He says, and so now his testimony is, and after this, I confess to you that according to the way, which they call a sect, so I worship my Elohim of my fathers. So the way that the people of the way worshiped, Saul is saying, that's how I worship. That's how I'm worshiping the Elohim of my fathers in the knowledge of Messiah. And did things change? Absolutely. There's understanding that they were learning too. We're not looking to the Dead Sea Scrolls as our statement of faith. The New Testament is our statement of faith, but we're looking at the foundation of the New Testament and the principles and the ideas and the prophecies that came out of that community. And so he says, listen, I'm worshiping the gods of my fathers according to the way, which they call a sect. And of course, there's other parts where they mention all three, that he's a leader. Saul actually becomes a leader of that sect. The group that he tried to destroy, he becomes a leader of. All right. So, what are the Messiah's words concerning the Pharisees and the Sadducees? Just real quick. And I spent all night just to go over all of them. So I'm just doing just a couple real quick. John 8:44. Remember, these are the Master's words, right? These are Yah's words. This is Mashiach's words. You, Pharisees, are of the devil, and the desires of your father, your father, the devil, not just of the devil, your father is the devil. And the desires of your father you wish to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and he has not stood in the truth. He's a murderer, so are you. He does not stand in the truth. He does not have the Torah within him. He does not have a Yah's word within him, because there is no truth in him. There is no Torah in his heart. And when he speaks the lie, same lie that they're speaking, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. Who were the Pharisees? Well, they were liars, they were murderers, they were thieves, all to get authority and power. John chapter 5, verse 37, he says, and the Father who sent me, he bore witness of me. You have neither heard his voice at any time nor seen his form. And I think he's specifically talking to them, the Pharisees and Sadducees. I think as we're reading this, I think maybe have misunderstood at least this particular version of it. I think what he's saying is, you guys, you don't hear his voice. I'm speaking to you, and you still don't hear his voice. And you don't see him. You've never seen him. He could be standing right in front of you. Yah could be standing right in front of you in his glorified form, and you would deny it. I think that's what he's saying. You've neither heard his voice at any time nor seen his form. There's other things about whether you see him or you don't see him, but I'm just talking about right here. He's talking to the Pharisees and Sadducees. And he says, and you do not have his word staying in you, because you don't believe in him who he sent. Their concept back then, the Pharisaic and the Sadduceic concept of Messiah and the concept of Judaism today is the same. They do not believe in a Messiah that is to be Elohim on earth. They don't believe in a Messiah who is going to die as a sacrifice and forgive sin. Even they don't believe in a Messiah who's going to become the Melchizedek high priest. That's not a Messiah that they believe in. Guess who does believe all of those things? The people of the community. When you read the Melchizedek scroll, it's all there. They believed in death and resurrection. They believed that he was God. They believed he was going to forgive their sin. They believed the temple was going to be destroyed after him. They believed all of that. They believed there's a first coming and there's a second coming. These are not Jewish or Pharisaic Judaism beliefs, but these are the foundation that becomes what we call the New Testament. And certainly these would be beliefs that all of us would say, yeah, of course, I believe all of those things. Because you don't believe whom he sent. You search the scriptures because you think that by oral Torah, what you say, you possess eternal life in all of the things that you do. And these are the ones, the scripture, that bear witness of me. So their whole understanding was wrong. So they're waiting for some conqueror to come. They're waiting for some king to come. Even today, they're not waiting for that kind of Messiah. Israel today, you say Messiah, it could be a man. They look at Trump as a Messiah. They've looked at other people. They're talking about some man, some leader is going to come and protect them. Their idea was the Messiah would come and he would defeat Rome and get Rome off of their backs, and everything would be great, and he would be the Messiah, and then that would be the kingdom. No, that's not the story. That's not him being pierced. That's not him dying for our transgressions. That's not any of that. That's not him saying, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? That they cast lots for my garments. That's not any of that. That's not Abraham offering up Isaac on Mount Moriah. That's not any of that. That's because that's not the Jewish belief. But it was Jews who believed that in the community, and certainly everybody that became believers from that point forward. John 3, verse 19. And this is the judgment. That light, and I put Malachi 4, verse 2, because you got to realize the context here. These are terms we know from the Qumran scrolls. These are terms that were known in the first century, but they're not Pharisaic terms or Sadduceic terms. They're from a different community. And this is the judgment that the light, Malachi chapter 4, verse 2, but to you who fear my name, the Son, S-U-N, of righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings. The coming Mashiach, the God who's going to enter into his temple, is referred to as the Son, S-U-N. Yes, he's the Son, S-O-N. But Malachi uses the sun like, the big star up in the skies has come. And this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, or the Son of Righteousness has arisen with healing in his wings. And men, Pharisees and Sadducees, and the Jews who follow them, loved darkness. They were called sons of darkness rather than the light, for their works were wicked. They were the wicked priests. For everyone who is practicing evil matters hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his work should be exposed and he lose his authority. Like Lazarus being raised and afraid, oh my goodness, that's it. Rome's going to come in and destroy us. And look where that actually happened. But the one doing the truth comes to the light so that his works are clearly seen, that they have been wrought in Elohim. All right, I'm trying to zip through this. Give me just one more minute. So more of Messiah's words. I'm just going to summarize. I've been listening to Morning Manners. You've heard some of this. Here's what Messiah, and this isn't all of them. This is just a short little list of what Messiah says about Pharisees and Sadducees, but Pharisees in particular. Hypocrites, you assume Moses' seat. You bring burdens, yokes. You close up the kingdom to men. You are movers of the landmark. You close up the kingdom. They're lovers of titles. They praise, they pursue, not praise, they pursue wealth. They pursue praise and wealth. They bring converts to hell with them, to Gehenna with them. They're blind guides. They're fools and blind. They're blind leading the blind. They're trees my father did not plant. They are wolves in sheep's clothing. They are fruitless trees. They are loveless. They are merciless. They are extortioners and self-indulgent. They are unclean within. They are whitewashed tombs, full of death, lawless without Torah. They are murderers like their fathers. They are serpents and vipers. Keep being these things, and they keep being these things. I'm not reading all that. They keep being these things against his followers in the future. So they were these things, and they are these things, all the way from the book of Acts, all the way to the book of Revelation, all the way up till today. There's still Phariseeism. There's still Phariseeism. And a lot of us, we've all been influenced by it. Revelation 3:9. The Revelation is obviously a book about the end, and the 7 letters are about things, yes, that are going on in real congregations in that day, but they are prophecies about what's going to be going on in the day of Yah. And so each one of the 7 letters is an amazing study in and of itself. But listen to what it says in 2 of the letters about the end days, what's going to happen. Revelation chapter 3, verse 9, see, I'm giving up those of the congregation of Satan who say that they are Jews, but are not, but lie. Well, who's he referring to? Sadducees. Well, in this particular case, Pharisees, because the Sadducees are done. Sadducees are finished. Temple was destroyed. Priests were killed. The Pharisees were the only one, the last man standing, except the people of the way have now scattered all over the world. But the last man standing in Israel was the Pharisees. They are the king of the hill. They won, at least in their mind, they won. And that's what's been being passed down from generation to generation all the way up till today. They say that they're Jews, but they are not. They lie. Just like when we read, it was the Jews' Passover, or the Jews, those who follow the Pharisees, all the Jews follow him. That's who he's referring to. He's saying they're not Jews. There's lots of Jews. In fact, the majority of the believers in this day were all Jews. But he's saying there's a difference between being a real Jew in your heart and being this thing that these people are, the blind leading the blind. See, I'm making them come and worship before your feet to know that I have loved you. That's going to happen. Revelation 2:9. I know your works and pressure and poverty, yet you are rich. And the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, just like Saul's blasphemy, just like Caiaphas's blasphemy, just like those who ran to the Jews after the raising of Lazarus. That was all blasphemy. And so that's what he's talking about here. I know those who say that they are Jews. I know they're blaspheming. I know that they reject me. I know that they reject my Torah. I know that they've changed everything. I know that they're getting all sorts of people to follow them in these changes. And it is the blind leading the blind because my Father never planted them. And he's going to uproot them soon. Do not be afraid what you're about to suffer. Well, you're going to suffer at the hands of who? Them. Back then and in the future. We're talking about the day of Yah. See, the devil's about to throw some of you in prison. Well, who do they serve? Who's their father? I know this is rough. You can say, oh, this is anti-Semitic. No, it's not. I'm just telling you what the master said. Who's their father? Well, who's going to throw them in prison? The children of him. See, the devil's about to throw some of you into prison in order to try you, and you shall have pressure 10 days. Be trustworthy unto death, because what are they going to do? They're going to kill you. They're going to kill you. And that day of the Yah coming, they're going to kill you. And I shall give you the crown of life. So it's in the beginning and it's in the end. What's the master's overall word on this? Matthew 16:11. After the feeding of the 5,000 and the 5,000 and the 4,000. How is it that you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning bread, but to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees? To beware doesn't mean to, have knowledge of, understand. It means avoid, stay away from the doctrine of the Pharisees and Sadducees, or the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees, verse 12. And then they understood that they did not say to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. If you follow their teaching, then not only are they going to fall off a cliff, but you're going to fall off a cliff right behind them. The Pharisees did it then, and they're still doing it today. So let me ask you a question. I know I ran over time tonight. Let me ask you a question, as I asked before. Somebody lies to you over and over and over and over, just historically, just add animosity with them forever and ever and ever. Horrific neighbor. Is that the person you're going to take advice from? How to raise your kids, what to do, what not to do? Is that really the person you would take advice from? Well, the simple answer would be no. It'd be silly to do that to someone that you know despises you so much, rejects the God that came and died for all of us, including them. The forgiveness is for everybody. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. So forgiveness is for all. This is not an anti-anybody message. This is just the story. That's the story. And we got to understand it to understand where we are. So the question that we have to really think about here is, well, who are the ones that told us about the calendar that's used today to celebrate the Moedim and how to celebrate it? And the other things like Hanukkah and all these other things, and telling the Gentiles to keep 7 particular rules instead of 10. Who's telling us that? Well, the descendants of the people that the master already described. Think about that, guys. I know it's not a morning manna, but think about that, beloved. Think about that. Let that percolate in for a second. And all of a sudden, I don't know about you, but I started thinking, wait a minute, we really need to take another look at this. We need to learn some history. We need to learn what's going on. More than that, even without the history, listen to what Messiah says from the Gospels all the way to the book of Revelation, which means it's still going to be here now, and it's definitely going to get worse in the future before Messiah comes. So, do you believe plants that the Messiah, that Yah planted, or trees that are not his planting? Anyway, think about that tonight, guys. Something to think about before you go to bed. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight. I hope that you guys enjoyed that study for tonight. Listen to it again, go over it. Obviously, these are just simple stuff. This is all stuff that we know, but sometimes you just don't know it until you see it, and so it gets brought and put together. And you're like, oh my goodness, it's right there. Yes, that's why there's so much animosity. That's why there's so much anger. And hopefully this will help us to understand some other things. We're definitely going to get into some of the mechanics of the calendar soon. We're going to get to John the Baptist this upcoming Shabbat as well. Try to get into some history as well to give you guys some background. But in the meantime, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. I sincerely appreciate it. Don't forget Friday night. Brother Max is not going to be here this Friday night. So I think it's going to be me and PM. We'll put out a notice to let you guys know for sure. But definitely Saturday, 10:30 is our Shabbat service. And each morning, guys, listen to Morning Manna before you guys go to work. Guys, thanks again for hanging out with me. Shalom, everybody. Good night.